and in a way that highlights to the parents that this child has abilities that maybe their parents didn't give them the space to express. That one change linked to creating a work environment for educators that is more rewarding from a personal perspective unlocks the revenue potential, hands down.
Welcome to the Rubasha Family Podcast. I have an amazing guest here today. I have Audrey. Now, Audrey is an amazing visionary who's had a vision within her mind to live out in reality, into the future of work and education strategist. She's a board advisor, a speaker, 2023 MENA, 40 over 40, award-winning coach, a futurist, which I love that word, and board member, someone who's done this over 26 years. For over 26 years, experience in operations and finance, dedicated to shaping the future of education. Your global perspective gained through consulting, executive leadership, and innovation in education enables you to help organizations thrive through amid rapid change with governments and all these amazing places, obviously leading successfully large-scale transformation initiatives. And one thing when we spoke, you said something which was quite powerful. You said a lot of people don't look at education or the education sector as a business. So it's a pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much for giving us your time. And we're so looking forward to learning from you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
No worries. So look, let's start from the beginning. Take us a little bit back. How did I know that was such a powerful introduction into who you are, which is powerful. And people can see the out product, but they don't see what happened. They don't see the groundwork that led to get you to where you are. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and how you started?
Sure. And thank you. I am humbled. Sometimes it's interesting to hear what you've been doing from other people's perspectives because you're just sort of in the weeds getting things done and you have a vision and you're focused on it. But my vision started back when I was quite young, and I had as with most young people, you have an idea of where you want to go and what you want to do to make the world a better place. And for me, my original sort of career focus was abruptly ended when I realized that the values that were important to me, i.e., helping society, building a better place, would not be fulfilled in the career choice that I was looking at. So it was a criminal defense lawyer. And the power of being able to communicate with someone who was in that role, who could tell me that if you do follow that pathway, yes, you're going to do wonderful things for those that need your help, but you're also going to be aiding the other side.
Marketing is all about storytelling. Dad, when we first started this business, what did you say to me?
I said, yes, we do a podcast.
Why?
Because I want to tell our story.
Why?
Because I know the story builds a legacy.
Builds a legacy. And that is exactly what we do here at ETS Rubasha Media. We market your story on social media so you could build a legacy for those who come after you, to build your business and your personal brand.
Yeah, follow us on our platform. Go on our website, etsrubashamedia.com.
This is about legacy, and it is about showing up on social media every single day, because if you don't show up, your competition will.
Really gave me that powerful step back to say, well, how can I then take what skills I have and apply them in the world in a way that's going to see progress? So I took a normal corporate role, got into finance, then into operations. And years later, while I was developing a school in the UAE, I realized that part of the transition of my career in terms of supporting people, in terms of company culture, in terms of integration and operations on a global scale, part of the issues that I had been working on for 10 plus years of helping disengaged employees become re-engaged in their work. So bringing up productivity, ensuring culture within the organization, all of that fell into the prospect of people have skills, and when they're only driven to manage their skills and find success using skills, you lose the person. And when you can step back and look at, well, look at careers from a different perspective. If everyone was working to reach their North Star and using their career to do so, they would be a lot more um, forthright in why they're there. They would be a lot more innovative in terms of how they can make an impact. They would be a lot more inquisitive about bringing their true skills or interests or needs to the business that they're serving, and therefore the company gains and then the people gain, and you end up with this win-win. And I saw it a few times, but I didn't normally recognize it until I started working with youth and understanding that this is what's happening when we train youth to think about their career from a skills perspective. You don't train them to think about the value and the impact that they're putting into the world. So you end up with adults on the other side that say, I'm a really successful CFO, or I am an ultra successful leader, and now I'm the CEO and on the board of 3 companies, but I don't feel fulfilled in terms of the impact of what I've done. And then the midlife crisis comes into play, where they spend money on cars, change their wives, look at a whole new life, when actually what they're trying to do is just find a little bit more meaning in why they made the decisions that they've made. So the company that I lead, the Bedrock program, we look at that whole future of work perspective and say, if we can work with the students and help them understand, and then work with the education teams that are supporting those students to help them understand how to bring that aspect into their business, then the outcome is better suited for the economy and the work world that we're looking to build. So, when I talk about looking at education as a business, it really is. It's shaping the minds and hearts of youth, yes. But the better you get at delivering the right output, more parents will come, the happier the teachers are with the type of students that they have and the engagement in the classroom and the motivation that comes out of it. And then, of course, the better reputation that they have for the type of students that they produce all leads to higher revenues, better communities. And I've seen it. I've seen it here in the UAE, where I currently am based. I've seen it in different universities that I've worked with around the world. When they start to bring more deeper motivation engagement in the classroom and look at how to utilize technology to bring into play the individual and how the business is being run, wonderful things come out of it. Incredibly transformational changes and shifts. And then business partners become a lot more engaged, and they want to work with those universities and schools, and you just see such prosperity that naturally starts to unfold and come together.
Wow, so powerful. You talked a little bit about your journey within the criminal defense law,
Mhm.
when you first started, and you said that you acquired and had powerful skills that could be transferable. What were those skills?
For me, I have always been told that I have good oration skills and I have incredible analytical mind. I've been told that, and this is actually quite a blessing, I think, to be told this when you're young, because oftentimes the messages to young people are not as positive. But I was told from when I was young that I'm a bit of a systems thinker, right? I
And
don't
who was telling you that?
I
Sorry to cut
had,
you.
no, that's okay. I had teachers tell me that. I've had career advisors tell me that as I worked with people. And I have an incredibly supportive aunt who also had recognized that. And I didn't actually understand what that meant.
Mhm,
To be honest, as a teenager, you're just sort of like, okay, well, that's how my
mhm,
mind works. You
mhm.
tell me one thing, and I can see all the hubs and spokes of what could potentially contribute and how it comes together. And if you make small changes, I can sort of understand how it might tip certain balances and think about things differently. And that's actually what made my stepfather think that law would be a good place for me, because if you can sort of see the impact of one statement, you might be in a better position to support a client or look at things differently. But these are skills that translate. So when I finished university and I went into finance, it wasn't because of the numbers. It was because of the story behind the numbers, right? My first role was in budgeting for GT Telecom, which is at the time, it was a pretty large scale telecommunications firm who had the focus of building the fiber optic network across Canada. And so I was sitting in the budgeting team for the infrastructure team, right? So we were literally planning out how are we going to build fiber optic cables that were going to stretch coast to coast and support communities across the country.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in how that was going to happen. Like, how does that work, right? So when you're looking at the project, I had that natural inquisitiveness. How do you do it? How do you connect? How do you look at cables and suppliers? And so that was really interesting. And then when I obviously part of budgeting, you then get into FP&A, which is great because then you get to tell the story. So one, you're planning the story, then you're telling the story, but because you plan the story, you can sort of understand what went right, what went wrong, where it's all coming together. And that's sort of how my career in finance exploded because of that natural inquisitiveness, not for the numbers per se, but for the reason why the numbers changed, for the ability to dig deeper behind what I'm hearing and be curious. And that curiosity, I think every child is born with it. But for a lot of people, it's also educated out of them, right? They're told, well, it doesn't matter what you think, 1 + 1 = 2. And always think of it this way. And so they lose that natural essence of wanting to learn more, ask more questions. And that's a really big downfall. So essentially, in terms of my background, that FP&A role sort of led into managing teams because I have a natural people leadership focus that has always come out. I get to know people. I love, sitting down, and it's not just on a work perspective, but a bit on a personal perspective because it's relationships when you're spending so much time in the office with people. And eventually it led to, working in the UK for Digitas and being an FD, an associate director, and, taking things further to my MBA, which I happened to get while I was in London. And then in 2009, I joined a company called Kit Digital. They had moved their headquarters from New York to Prague. I did a bit of an inversion based on purchasing a company in the Czech Republic. And they wanted someone who could look at operational finance of the companies they had recently acquired. How can they bring the financial operations in line? Because they are a NASDAQ company at the time. And so that was my focus. There were 4 acquisitions that had been completed, and my job was to ensure that the systems were aligned with US GAAP. We had a company in Italy, we had a company in the Czech Republic, and we had a company in France and so forth, and we had a company in Singapore. And then the other side of it was to get the company Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. So those were the sort of 2 focal points that I had within a 12-month period. We were successful, all went well, and they decided to continue and do another buying spree. So then they asked me to go into the M&A team and to help them assess how we were going to integrate new companies coming in. And it started off looking at it from a finance perspective, but then soon they realized that I could look at it from a larger as well. And within about 1.5 2 years, when we closed the M&A side, they asked me to stay on, and eventually I became the vice president of global business operations, looking at how to bring all of those 9 companies we bought into the sphere. So that kind of brings you up to sort of how I got to the operational and the finance background. And it was during those roles where I'm constantly trying to find the productivity and the success out of each and every one of those initiatives that we were launching, that I started to realize that there's something missing from the equation. And it was when I moved to the UAE about 11 years ago that we realized it starts with the mindset, right? It's how we're preparing people for the work world. And if I'm going to be able to make a big difference in the future of work, I need to start with that future and help the organizations that are bringing it along to do so with a much more intentional mindset.
Mm-hmm. So now this is where it's getting interesting and juicy. I want to talk a little bit about those M&A transactions because there's so many CEOs who are listening to this. How does this apply to the small business aspect on the finance and the operations perspective? When you look at those deals, when they come and bring a visionary like you, who's analytic, who sees things, how can the small businesses, because small businesses, 50 million in revenue and under, so there's so many people who can apply to this. When you look at an M&A deal, what are some green flags that you can see at like that we can learn from the companies at that scale that they do really well with their finances, and what are some things that if you were looking at it and say, oh, I don't think we should maybe buy this company? What are those things that someone, a CEO who's watching this can apply that into their business from the finance with the CFO, wherever, to make sure their operations are streamlined for their exit and for whatever they're trying to go?
Sure. It's a good question. So there are a number of reasons why a company will buy another company. And the most important thing that you need to do is be aligned with your leadership team as to what you're buying and why, right? Because this changes how you look at the company,
Mm-hmm.
right? When someone's buying a company for revenue,
Mm-hmm.
then they need to not just look at the current revenue that that company is making, but look at their pipeline. They need to understand their sales contracts, right? How are they written? Who benefits? And what are the differences between those legal obligations and how you run your business and the legal obligations that you already hold to your customers? And are you willing to meet in the middle? Right? Because buying another company doesn't always nullify the requirements of that revenue release. You can't recognize it unless you fulfill your part of the obligation. So that's the first thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not enough to just say, well, we're buying this company and this much revenue is now coming on the books, because if you can never realize that revenue, it doesn't help. Second is to look at the customers that you're actually purchasing and who's in the pipeline, right? And to identify whether or not those are real leads and those partnerships are real partnerships, right? When you're looking at the people in the organization, this is the trickiest part,
Mm-hmm.
because based on your level of how much you're utilizing your own workforce, you may need to keep those people in order to keep the relationships, right? In order to realize that revenue. Or you may need a period of time to grasp the knowledge. And there's always a situation where you need to look at whether or not you want to keep dead weight on either side. And this is really difficult. There are provisions that a lot of transactions have, which look at who stays, what level, where looking at one of the most important parts is the knowledge management, right? What's the institutional knowledge that they have that you need in order to keep the success flying? Some people buy companies because of the physical growth. And it's not so much that they're buying a company that's strong. They might be buying a distressed company where they don't really care about the individuals that are in that new organization.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that we always did was sit back and say, okay, even if we're only buying for structure, are there any gems in that company that we've been looking for that we don't have? Like, these are all elements that I think on both sides there needs to be thought, because If I know I've had a really tough hiring pipeline for specific technical folk, or strong leadership in terms of different areas of management, and I look deep enough and I see that they're distressed, but it's not because of the areas that I need support in, then you can build those ties and relationships along the lines, um, and make your company stronger, not just bigger.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, the other nuance that happened in a couple of situations was the ties to regulatory institutions that we didn't have before, right? But because those relationships were strong with a couple of senior leadership in the companies that we're acquiring, it was an added benefit. And had we not spent the time to get to know why those deals were coming on board, we would have had them on the to go list and lost that benefit.
Mm.
Some of the things that I think caused issues were things like not understanding leases before the acquisition, right? So, what are the lease arrangements? You don't want to have 5 offices in the same town, but oops, we now have a legal obligation that if we lose one, it's going to cost us more than keeping the other 3. Um, ties to technical infrastructure, right? You can't just oftentimes sunset some infrastructure because it's no longer part of what you want to offer when you have old contractual relationships that require you to support. And that doesn't just speak to the technology, it also speaks to some of the servicing personnel. So having a broad range and looking at all of those different elements and being able to say, hold on a second, we're buying them for this. However, these are the other things that we need to manage in order to make sure that from a reputational, from a revenue, from a cost perspective, we're going to end up giving to our shareholders exactly what they agreed and voted on, right? And part of that is really sitting down and knowing the business before you purchase it. And that can be really hard when you either are so excited at the cherry in front of you or the candy that everyone's waving. And having a smaller team, I think one of the things that the team at Kid Digital did well was have a smaller team of us internal people that we were tasked to go and find those things.
Mm.
We were tasked to understanding, if we buy for this, is that actually going to come through? What are the provisions we need to think about in order to make that happen? With the finance background, I was able at times to sort of sit back and say, well, this is how they recognize the revenue in this country. But based on these milestones and based on what's on the table, we're not going to be able to bring all of that over in the next 12 months. And if we now take over operations, we have to redesign. So you end up with a 2-tier audit process where they have their local audit responsibilities and reporting. And then in the back end, when we're linking it to our systems, which are US GAAP, you have to realign how some of that revenue, pipeline, and costs flow through and affect our balance sheet and income statement.
Mm.
And that was, I think, part of what a lot of companies, like after the fact, when I spent some time talking to other people doing the same thing, these were part of, I think, the bigger issues that sometimes get lost when the big deal is done and the real work starts.
Mm. Wow, it's so powerful, and I love the way you broke that down. So just quickly, being on the other side, if someone who's watching this wants an exit and is looking for that, big dream of billions, millions, whatever, what should they be preparing for when they're going for an exit?
I would say the most scariest the scariest element they need to prepare for, but the most impactful at the same time, is governance. Right? They need to prove to the person, if they want a big exit, that means they're trying to attract either a big VC firm or a big company to say, hey, I'm worth a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And those companies want to know you have your stuff together. They want to see that you have your governance structures in hand. They want to see that you have your policies in place. They want to see proof that you've been following and adhering to it. They want to see that regardless of how the revenue has been, that what they're buying is on solid ground. It's like walking over to a house and saying you want a house to eat. Whether or not it looks pretty on the inside is one thing, but if the bones, the foundation is there, people will buy it. And they will pay for strong bones, even if they know that they have to come in and demolish some walls and rip out some flooring and do a bit of rewiring. That doesn't bother somebody. I put it in a real estate context because I was recently supporting someone I know that was in real estate. But the concept is the same, right? Smart business people want smart foundation. And they want to know that the guys at the top are smart, doing things right, have the right reputation, and they want to know. So that could be the product itself or the service and the people hired to do that. It could be the frameworks that are supporting the product. So sometimes the product itself, it's either too early or it's kind of, we've moved on, but the company itself is so strong that someone can see how they can utilize and support that going forward. So it's never a sexy topic to talk about governance and knowledge management and regulatory frameworks. But honestly, this is the stuff that drives everyone who's truly seriously about spending big money on a company, because it gives them the flexibility.
Yeah. Powerful. And just to transition to the educational, sector where you are, you talked a little bit about curiosity before and how that's needed now more than ever, to be curious, to ask questions. How was it for you when you have such an entrepreneurial mindset like that, now coming into the education where that's kind of taught out of, where, it's not really needed? And so is there agendas with schools, and, is there agendas on what they're teaching, because it steers far away from a lot of the, entrepreneurial things that make individuals make people go out into society and create things from their imagination and live like that. So, how was that for you now going into education with the mindset that you have, and what were some of the things that you saw was lacking and that you thought, okay, how can we improve on this?
So when it comes to working with education leaders, it's usually on two sets, right? The curiosity is about how are they managing and preparing the clients, so the students, and working with the parents, the families. And how are the organizations allowing the teachers to become curious enough about their students to instill the curiosity in the students and have this working model? And you're right, with the curriculum and the requirements and the testing and everything else, it has become hard for a lot of the educators to take that approach because they're so worried about the next test, the next exam. I was an educator. I worked for 3 years as a lecturer in Middlesex University here in Dubai. So all of these things I did are to understand better from the inside. So I built a K-12 school and got it running and through regulatory process. And I worked in a university to understand how they think differently, how they support students, how they develop curriculum based on the guidelines, because it's very different in a university than it is in a K-12 environment. And so the motivation driving the engagement with the students. When you see the impact with the families, you understand that whole revenue generating cycle, right? For places like the UAE where everything is private, it was much easier to see. For places like the UK or Canada, both of which I'm from, it's harder to see because you imagine that it's a government entity. So therefore, it doesn't matter, but it does, because whoever goes to study in that community in a K-12 environment, that community is your clientele. And when you have a good school, the property prices rise, more people want to live there, the gentry around your school is affected, the shops and industry around that is also affected. So there's a knock-on effect. So on both sides, we see it as a business. It has to be seen as a business. And the output is what happens for the students and the families. The other way of looking at it and understanding the curiosity element is in understanding the business itself. So as leadership, when we look at how much are we spending, what are revenue, or so how many enrollments are we getting, now we're looking at, okay, but how much do we understand the business, right? Which teachers or educators are bringing out the genius in the children that they work with? So how many of them are spending the time and the energy to bring forth that curiosity and create a good learning environment that allows for all of the learning profiles, or most of them, for the 26 plus children in the classrooms, right? What does that look like? So is our institution inviting or attracting enough people that are of a certain, not even class, forget about class, but intelligence level? And when we have someone who is underperforming, how do we increase their ability to come back? So you can look at this from how they teach, from the output of the tests, to the social emotional element and the well-being and the interactions between the teacher and the parents. But you can also look at it from, square footage per student, how much space are they getting, really looking at well-being as a mental and physical well-being. And all of these things relate, because you could have two schools charging the same amount of money. One school is high performing because of the provisions they're putting in place to support the product development, so the students themselves, whether university or K-12, it's irrelevant, and another is not. And you see the output. The difference is that when it's fee paying, the institution that's doing more can increase fees or can expand and just increase enrollments and see a better return on doing the same thing, while the other institution will start to fall back and have issues and not attract the same type of teachers, and have the negative knock-on effect.
So, like, if we break it down, I
Mhm.
think in such a simple way, how does a school make money?
So schools make money on a number of different ways. One is public partnerships. So whether or not they team up with organizations to, sometimes it's to bring certain curricula or projects to the family or the community that they serve. In the private sphere, it's obviously through enrollments, right? Some schools make money on the peripheries that they offer, special programs that they might put in place. I know schools that charge more for certain gifted programs, certain summer camps that they team up with. I know schools that have um, certain tie-ins with certain organizations, as in like business organizations, that they then become a feeder to those organizations of top talent. Uh, there's so many different ways. I know schools that are doing online learning for certain students that have a hard time coming into the building. So they've increased their enrollments through offering an alternative way to engage. I know schools that have been personally running their own camps and specialty learning experiences, right? And it's not that they necessarily increase their enrollments in those through the parents, but they can do it through companies that sponsor it. They do it through government grants to run them, right? And it can be services. For instance, you have universities like the Ivy Leagues that offer these incredibly, insanely expensive summer programs for high school students. So a high school student from Botswana with good grades could go off and study in Cornell and get credit, university credits, before they even graduate high school.
Wow.
Right? So everyone's looking at new and innovative ways to increase their revenue streams, but the ones that do it well are ones that have already proven themselves to have a fantastic offering. The schools that don't take the time, and when I say school, I mean university and K-12, that don't take the time to ensure, well-being of teachers and administration, then they get the reputation where, okay, the kids are doing well, but I wouldn't subject my child to that place more than I need to, right? Or if they try to launch a summer program, they find that the response rate isn't as high, because nowadays the information is out there. It's not that hard to do the right polling or the right searching to see that, well, I don't want my child there if I'm going to pay extra, or a company to say, well, yeah, what you talk about is great, but I don't know if you're the institution that I want to tie my reputation to. Right? So there's a lot of opportunities. It's just more a matter of understanding where the appetite is to grow it, and looking at what strategically you want to get out of long term besides revenue, for engaging. Because it's not enough to just say, well, we're going to have a summer program or we're going to tie up with this business. There needs to be a long-term gain that the client sees, and that the business sees, and that the other partner also gets.
So can anyone just start a school?
If you go through the right regulatory approvals within the area that you are, theoretically, yes.
You can.
Theoretically, yes. The difficulty lies, of course, in the barriers to entry that are in the country that you're in or that you want to get into. But here in the UAE, for instance, there are a plethora of new organizations that are starting new schools, old schools that are being bought by existing school groups. In Abu Dhabi alone, there's 14 different curricula. And so 14 different curricula are coming out as to 200 plus different schools to service almost 300,000 students. And as certain markets grow, there needs to be more schools, because an hour commute for a student in a school bus is not ideal. But if every community has a school, and in Dubai in particular, there's a lot of work being done to try to reduce traffic on the road. So of all of these new developments, I wouldn't say all, but there's about 50% of them where there's already discussions happening as to what school is going to be put in that community. So you can imagine, with all of these communities and all of these different curricula, there's so many opportunity for new schools to come on board, but that also means there's a lot of competition,
Mm.
right? There's competition because some of the school groups that are coming here in the UAE in particular are old English schools that have a great reputation back home. Like Harrow is coming, Dwight from the US is here, RGS is here. So, you know, it's the new, it's a satellite office of an old. It's connecting with certain curricula. It's understanding whether or not the regulator want more British schools, or if they're saying, well, we're noticing more people from, say, Canada. Where are the Canadian curriculum schools? Or I know there's a huge influx of organizations that are trying to do homeschooling and
Mm.
support the homeschooling communities that are also around. And
Mm.
then the question comes up, okay, but will that degree, high school diploma or university, be recognized when that individual goes to work here, right? Or if a individual goes to a university here and they've been homeschooled, will that university accept that degree, right? That high school diploma. So there's a lot of things to consider, and there's a lot of groundwork that needs to happen. The school that I helped to bring off the ground here in Dubai, when I joined, it was only primary. Then they expanded, and we built the secondary locations and everything that went around. That's a Swiss school, and so the whole concept there was offering English, German, English, French curricula, so bilingual curricula, which is not it's not heard of here. You either have a French school or you have school that's English, and then you have just the
Mm.
subject matter. And Matura, which is the deciding factor, because you can't get Swiss Matura outside of Switzerland. So that was the aha, which then meant that anyone here who had resided in Switzerland and had started their business or moved their business here or had hired Swiss people to come to the UAE, now they have a place to put their kids that they know that if they go back home, the kids can slip back
Mm.
into correct.
Got
And
you.
that's the whole reason why countries like the UAE have so many curricula,
Yeah.
is because it has been transient. And as people then want to move back home, or they lose their job and they go, or they just want the option to always be open, then
Mm.
they put their child in the curriculum in which they can go back to their home country and know that their child hasn't lost any time.
Mhm. So let me ask you, where do you see the future going? You know, it's so interesting that we're having this conversation, the way life works. So the other day I went to actually one of our clients went and did a podcast at this school with the principal. Then, you know, the principal saw the podcast, they were very happy. Then they invited me to go there, met the school and potentially starting a podcast for them. And I was there. I did a tour of the school, and it just kind of hit me. I'm like, holy crap! Even schools like podcasting, like this is powerful. I was telling the principal, imagine the parents seeing, the children, what's happening in the school, what's the mission and the vision. And she had an idea, which we kind of brainstormed together, to have the students come in on the podcast and talk about what they're passionate about, what they love. So my question is more so like, where do you see the future going with schools and what's happening with AI and social media, and even keynote speakers coming to schools? I think that's always kind of been happening, but yeah, where do you see the future going? Because there's just so much now opportunity. Because I'm also thinking, I was even telling her, I was like, wow, even getting sponsors. I said, do you know how much money we can get sponsorships for your podcast? School that adds additional revenue. We couldn't see that 10 years ago. Like, you're telling me you already have your school, but now guys can get additional revenue by just having a podcast, doing what's authentic and showing the school to more people. And she was really amazed. So yeah, I wanted to ask that, where do you see the future going and what's your mission and vision? And yeah.
So before I give you my mission and vision, what I would say to you is, when you talk to school leadership about such exciting things,
Mhm.
what's really important is to
Mhm.
make sure that they sit down and they have a direct strategy about these things, right? It's not enough for a school principal or even a math teacher to be like, yeah, this would be great. Let's say school, where I come from, schools had a little radio station. And so they always broadcasted a little radio station that, the community could listen to, which is great. But in this day and age where, their images and their
Mhm.
voice and their everything is now open and a podcast is open, there are security concerns, right? Who should be able to see the students on your campus, hear their voice, and have their image, right? It's things like making sure you have the right consent from families, right? We know about being able to take someone's image and create fake videos that are sometimes quite dangerous, right? In the UAE, there's a lot of, so the way that the UAE is structured, there's these sheikhs, each emirate has a sheikh that sort of guides over those who are living within their space, almost like you would say a governor of a particular state in the US or a province. And they have children, lots of them, right? Because in the Muslim community, you can have, I think, up to 4 or 5 wives, and they can have many children. It's part of the culture to have. So these children of important people, including even the expats that come in, some of them are high-ranking CEOs. I have had them come to me and say, I'm not comfortable with the school having my child's image in their social media. So there's media release forms, right? So there's a lot to think through. Then you have the tie-in with the school and the strategy of, is that corporation the one that you want your school affiliated with? Have you done your research? Are you sure that that's what you want, right? So there's a lot of scrutiny now in regards to how much influence corporations should have in education, and when they do, what that should look like, and who benefits, right? So that's what I would suggest. And there you go. That's my mind, right? As you talked about one thing, and I'm like, there's a lot, and there's a lot more that's bouncing around in my head, but maybe for another time. What would my vision look like? I have already started working with some schools, and I see a very clear opportunity for schools to shift how they deliver their curriculum in a way that creates more curiosity and engagement with their students, and in a way that highlights to the parents that this child has abilities that maybe their parents didn't give them the space to express. Because that one change linked to creating a work environment for educators that is more rewarding from a personal perspective unlocks the revenue potential. Hands down. Hands down, the universities want to go and recruit students from those schools. The companies want to interview and work with the universities that have those students, right? And this is what I mean. The business of education is linked to the product. It's not just linked to the flashy story. And when we open that box and we take it seriously, right, there are so many ways to instill your curriculum. And when you unlock the curiosity of the teacher, those ways open up. And we know it has to be experiential. Students are done with sitting in the rows of classrooms. Yes, miss, no, miss, I'm smart, I'm dumb. That's over. There's too much exposure now to the fact that there are other ways of learning that a lot of schools can't get away with that anymore. And parents know it. In the old days, the parents would say, well, we got to beat it into my kid. We got to make them sit down and learn it. We're going to, now they say, oh, this school isn't good for my child. My child learns differently. The conversations are being had differently. But the schools that are seen as the ones that can truly care for and take care of the students are also the schools where the teachers themselves are, or the educators themselves are really positive about the environment that they work in. And it becomes this snowball. And I see there being those institutions that are going to continue to get that right and move with it. And some of them will utilize AI because it's a powerful tool. When you can overlay a structure that can look at the history that you have of the students and their families, because this you get anyways, right? The families may say, well, I'm not sharing it. Actually, it's being shared all the time. The kids, it's there. And I know schools that have listening devices in the classroom. They say they use it to ensure that the relationship between the teacher and the students is correct, but they also capture other information. It's just there, right? And in some respects, when the ed tech company sells it, they sell it with the right reasoning, but the data that comes back is super rich and super interesting. When you take this information, you link it to how the students are performing, you look at how your business is running. So you're putting it across your financials, you're looking at it from the cost base of maintaining and supporting the building, you're looking at air quality, you're looking at utilization of spaces, you're looking at staff utilization, you're understanding better. When you put it all together and you have such a rich set of dynamics, and then you have the right one or two people who can say, okay, now how do we make sense of this? And how do we unlock opportunities we're not seeing? And how do we increase on the leakages that we didn't know we were having? Right? Whether it's retention, whether it's initiatives to boost morale, whatever they are. And then you can work on your media exposure, how that looks to other companies, what that looks like to other universities. You can highlight your success. You can utilize your parents as testimonials. You can get involved in research. All of these things then highlight and heighten your offering. It makes you susceptible to great firms that want to expand what you're doing. So you may get, merger opportunities with that unlock revenue potential you never imagined. You could get tie-ups with amazing universities that create new and experiential learning opportunities for students that and then you start to see that merge. I can see the convergence between K-12 and higher ed. I can see it. And the only way it works is if the information links to what's happening in the future of work, in how businesses are changing. I was on a call yesterday where you had senior leadership from some of the best universities in the world talking about the fact that employers want students with AI skills. But when you actually dig deeper, you realize, well, what is AI skills? Is it coding? Is it agentic? Is it that they know within each of the different faculties that they're in how to use AI, how to influence AI, how to build AI? But the businesses don't know. So then the universities are like, well, what element of this are we looking at? And then are we going to hit the mark if we go and invest in tweaking our curriculum to match what no one knows they actually need? And they don't know what they need because in the business world, things keep moving. And that really highlighted for me the fluidity, right? The conversations that need to continue. Business leaders need to be involved. There needs to be the public-private partnerships between education and the business world. But education needs to be smart about it so that they're actually delivering what they need to and not just giving, they create these Apple schools or these Microsoft schools, and all they've done is create generations who need to only work on iOS or only work on, okay, that's nice. They've now gotten future users, but that's not what it should be about. And that's because the schools didn't think past the need for the machine and look at the broader context of what they were offering and develop partnerships that work better on both sides.
Powerful. It's interesting because just like you were talking about the skills that you had since you were a child, we can see them all throughout this podcast, the ability to communicate, be analytic and see the vision and talk about a futurist. And that's what I love. I love people who, can bring the future and the present moment and project that out into reality is quite powerful. And we also have here at ETS Rubasha Media our speaker section, so where we have people coming in and looking for keynote speakers. And I don't think we have someone in education, and there's so many universities here in Australia, so many places that need someone like you. So if that ever comes up, and if anyone's ever listening to this, but I think that'd be great if that ever does come up, at least we can put you in position to be coming in and being a keynote speaker. I wanted to ask one quick question before we get out of here. What's it been like living in Dubai?
Oh, it's been a roller coaster. And it's been wonderful. Like anywhere, when you live somewhere, initially it's exciting and it's new and you're doing cool things like going into the mountains in Ras Al Khaimah and, swimming in Snoopy Island and Fujairah, to going into the empty quarter of the beautiful red sand deserts in Abu Dhabi, or, going to Fossil Rock in Sharjah, where it used to be underwater. I didn't know this, but it used to be underwater. So you have fossils like at the bottom of the sea. To the bright lights of, the Burj Khalifa and all of it. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I say, from our family, the fact that I moved here with really young children, this was the best place for me because it's super safe. You can afford to have house help. You can really take care of your family while building your career. And even though it's hot 6 months out of the year, like really hot, they've done so much to create the ability to have experiences. You don't need to leave. You can have a really good, a good childhood. My children have had a really good childhood. And I've not had the type of stress that I know that a lot of my friends have had back home in Canada, the US, or the UK. And then I've just seen the country just develop and find its own feet and learn how a population where the native Emiratis are like 10% and everyone else is expat, but find a way to infuse that culture so that people are safe, people are respectful. You can kind of feel that difference. It's international and it's modern, but it's not a completely Western. You can find your pocket, and you can also find experiences to grow from. So it's wonderful.
Amazing. Well, that's a fantastic way to end it off. Hopefully I'll see you in Dubai soon, but thank
I'd
you
like
so
that.
much. Yeah, that'd be awesome. We can grab a coffee and maybe even a podcast in person. I think we definitely have so much more to talk about. And,
Absolutely.
so many topics, especially on the business side. So I want to thank you so much for your time today, Audrey. You've been
Thank
amazing.
you.
And where can people find you?
The Bedrock program is www.thebedrockprogram.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Audrey Hametner. I'm on Instagram, Audrey_Hametner. And they can reach out to me on any of those, through any of those vehicles, and I'm more than happy to meet with people to discuss all kinds of things. I grow when I meet people and sit and have a coffee and learn about what they do and support.
Yeah, and I think that's just what's so awesome about LinkedIn. I mean, there's no greater time to be on this platform now more than ever. My goodness, like we've been able to do this whole podcast tour just through LinkedIn, right? And now more than ever, I just couldn't stress, and I tell business owners all the time how valuable it is to be on LinkedIn, and even just posting content. For example, like only 1% of people post content, so when you do, you stick out. But just in general, on a networking perspective, for us, from where we started to have this conversation. I don't know what 6 months from now, 12 months, I know we're going to be doing big things, speaking around the world, tours, again, I'm a futurist like you, so I can already see it right now. So just wanted to thank you so much. And all the details we'll put this on YouTube and Spotify for after, because it's live on LinkedIn, but later people can watch and replay and listen to it on their way to work or wherever. Especially, education sector, I think this will be powerful. The M&A stuff we talked about, just so many gems here. So I just want to thank you so much.
I appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity. It's not often that people have taken the time to try to understand why I think the way I do about education. So it was delightful to have this opportunity to talk about, the finance element and the operations, and to really delve into. It's hard to think about the future of work if you've not worked. And that's why people with a varied and strong background need to be there with the next generation. Because if you want it to be different, you have to do something to make it different.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you really enjoyed this video, make sure to click here, and I'm sure you're going to love that one.